Well, if you enjoyed pomp and ceremony yesterday and today are good days for you, folks, because it doesn't get any more pomp and ceremonial than this visit by the King and Queen. My, oh my, oh my. The media was wall-to-wall coverage on this yesterday and today, and just absolutely gushing over the King. Absolutely gushing over the King. And look, for some of you, that's appropriate, and it is historical. I get the historical context of it, and we will respect that today to a degree. When we chat with Barry MacKenzie with the Monarchist League of Canada, 10:45, we'll get his take on this and the relevance of it and the importance of it. And there are some noteworthy things to talk about for sure. But I will ask you this question when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Have you paid attention? Are you paying attention to the visit? And also, is the King's visit a net positive for Canada? When all is said and done, is it a net positive for this country? However you quantify that or measure that, I don't know that you can, but I suppose this is really subjective. There's no empirical data that would measure this, I suppose. But does it move this country forward in any way? And again, perhaps you think that it does. Perhaps you think that it's good for the country's esprit de corps or mood or whatever. Or you feel as though this is a good message to Donald Trump, some political message. I mean, the King is admittedly not political and will not make any political statements or commentary at all because that's the nature of the office. But supposedly, by even being here, this represents some defense of our sovereignty, which is there's irony there, considering that we're subjects to another country and to a king from another country. And so that's supposedly defending our sovereignty, I suppose. Anyway, look, I want to try and remain as neutral as I can on this. Everybody who knows this show and listens to this show regularly knows that I'm not a monarchist at all. But I understand that many of you out there and some of you feel as though this is a net positive for the country. So I'll ask you that question. Why or why not do you think this is a net positive for the country? And is it over the top, or when all is said and done, is it worth the investment and time and appropriate? These are some of the things that I'll ask you to weigh in on. Nova Scotia Power and this privacy breach is very, very disturbing, very troubling. Has many people concerned. Who the 270 whatever thousand people who received this letter in the mail, which is sobering when you look at it and its context and what is involved. A story on the CTV newscast yesterday on their website this morning. A Nova Scotia couple says they're devastated after losing $30,000 from their bank account, which they believe is tied to Nova Scotia Power's recent cyber security breach. Anyway, I'll talk more about this later in the show as well and get your opinion on this. Have you received this letter? Are you concerned? What are you doing to protect your finances? Have you signed up for the credit monitoring in which the Nova Scotia Power is providing for 2 years? Has Nova Scotia Power done enough in reaction to this? According to this couple, they called Nova Scotia Power, the number that they said to call, and they get the outage line, and that's it. Nothing else. And is this type of breach far more common than we realize? We hear CRA's been hacked, at least, I don't know how many times, but at least to some degree in the past. So if CRA is hacked, which is our federal tax agency, then I suppose how vulnerable are other institutions? And we hear about municipalities being hacked. We hear about health authorities being hacked. I mean, is it safe to assume that at some point your information will be compromised? I think that's possibly and probably a safe assumption, which is sad. But in this particular case, have you received this letter? Are you concerned? What are you doing to protect your family and your finances? And Nova Scotia Power, is there a level of accountability there? We're reaching out to, if not, we've already, Nova Scotia Power, because we're going to give them the opportunity to respond to this. I don't anticipate that they will, but perhaps they will. I think they should. But I don't anticipate that they will, but we'll give them the opportunity to do so. And also traffic in HRM. It would not come as a surprise to most that Vancouver and Toronto take the top two spots for worst traffic in Canada. But the third city on the podium is a bit more shocking. That's right, folks. Little old HRM. That's right. Us out here on the East Coast are the third worst when it comes to traffic congestion in Canada. This according to a 2024 TomTom Traffic Index, a company that analyzes traffic information across the globe. Cities are ranked based on their average time it takes traffic to travel 10 clicks in the city center. So what are your thoughts and frustrations with traffic in HRM? And we're entering, of course, an already in construction season. And we all know what happens at the choke points when there are accidents, and on the bridges and at the Winter Street Exchange and the Bedford Highway, notoriously bad for traffic backups. So what are your thoughts on traffic, and how do you deal with traffic? And when all is said and done, is it just something that you can't do anything about? You just have to deal with it, have to put up with it, have to exercise some patience. Perhaps it's something that's people are like to complain about, but it's one of those things that, what's the point of complaining? Nothing's going to change. It's not as though some magically HRM is going to solve its traffic woes. So again, something else that you can talk about when we open the phone lines in about an hour's time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass at the control board, doing a fine job as always. And thanks so much for tuning in and listening, folks. It looks like a dynamite day out there, so that's overdue as well. All right, joining me now is Raymond Sheppard, African Nova Scotian social justice and human rights advocate, here to join me to talk about the fact that hate crimes are substantially on the rise in Halifax. Raymond, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your participation.
My pleasure, Todd.
All right, so this story in the Chronicle Herald, I'll read a bit of it. Hate crimes have increased substantially in HRM. Hate crimes in the municipality rose sharply to 121 in 2023, up from 72 the previous year, according to Stats Canada. And in 2023, Nova Scotia held the distinction of the province or territory with the highest rate of police-reported hate crimes in Canada. What are your thoughts in general to start on this, Raymond?
I agree with that. I think a lot go unreported, but, hate crimes, there's various, segments, if you will, of hate crime, including the internet, which is way up there in terms of hate crimes. And, then there's offensive calls and texting and mailing and displays of hate in the sense of posters on people's land and all kinds of verbal abuse, harassment, criminal damage, arson, burning down people's homes, manslaughter, and murder. So hate crimes is on the increase across North America, and here in Nova Scotia, it is on an increase as well. And one does not have to go far to see examples of this. For instance, in a couple of years back, Inspector Dean Simmons was stopped by an RCMP officer, and he's an inspector with HPD. That should never have happened. There's crosses on lands and lawns in different parts of Nova Scotia during the last several years. There's a lack of history in schools that is a hate crime in and by itself, because there's only certain histories, and although there's books there, the histories are not taught in school about Indigenous First Nations, African Nova Scotians, and so on. That's hate in and by itself. You also see associated hidden hate crimes like the Lionel Desmond case, where he was able to buy a gun after he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and was then, with that gun in hand, was able to kill his family. And then you look at the Donald Marshall Jr. case, when Jr., a person I've known, was able was not able. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, or he got out after 11 years, when Roy Ebzery didn't like African Nova Scotians and killed Sandy Seal, which was a best friend to Donald Marshall. Indigenous peoples, for instance, were here first in this area, and yet they are made to pay taxes on land, and land was taken away from them. So that's, in my opinion, a hate crime as well. So there's varying levels of hate crimes, and it happens every day.
Raymond, what do you think some of the underlying issues are here? What is going on? Why do you think that this is continuing to happen and on the rise in our region? What are some of the base reasons for this?
I think, when you look at, the Criminal Justice Department or the Criminal Justice Acts and so on, in 2006 and 2010 and 2019 and 22, the Canadian Action Plan Against Racism, for instance, was put into place, and anti-racism strategy, for instance. But it has not gone far enough, and there's no persecution or prosecution, I should say, for people who have done these hate crimes or perpetuated these hate crimes. So when you look at police departments, for instance, recently, I believe in the town of Truro, a police officer threw a banana peel towards an African Nova Scotian police officer, which suggests that he's some kind of monkey. But that has not been dealt with, And so there has to be not only a strategy put in place to deal with this, but there has to be pro-action. People are not standing behind their words, government, police departments, and others, in terms of doing the legwork, if you will, going forward, taking things to court and so on. And half of, I would venture to say, the hate crimes in Nova Scotia are not reported because people just, oh, well, that's normal. Oh, well, I'll put up it won't go anywhere anyway, so I better not say anything, blah, 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 or I'm going to be harassed if I say something and so on. So there's a large number of people who face hate crimes that are not reporting them to Justice Department, police departments, and so on. And when they do report, there's a lack of investigation, in my opinion, based on the fact that, I'm sure that wasn't what you thought it was, and so on. So there's diminishing factors, if you will, play down. You wouldn't have a case in court anyway, so what's the sense?
Okay, so I suppose it sounds like it seems to me that we're a long ways away from being where we should be when it comes to responding and reacting to this. Does it start with law enforcement? That's kind of what I'm getting from you, that law enforcement and the courts need to take a lead approach to this. Is that what you're telling me here?
Yes, and I think politicians here and across, they, do double talk all the time and so on and so on. They speak out of both sides of their mouth, but at the same time, when it comes to the action picture, it's not happening. Oh, we put that off until this day and blah, 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 and so on and so on. So the politicians, largely responsible for the Police Act and stuff like that, and updating it and so on, has not done, in my opinion, their due diligence in bringing people before the courts, and the courts have not done their piece either, nor police. So some of the crimes, hate crimes, are happening because people feel they can get away with it. There's no penalties, and the penalties are so minor, who in Nova Scotia in the last 50 years have gone to prison because they facilitated a hate crime? I don't know. My research tells me I have no idea. Nobody has been counted for when it came to being behind bars because you perpetrated a hate crime. So people are just continuing to do it. And there are targeted peoples too, including, of course, African Nova Scotians, Indigenous, First Nation people. There are different sexualities, if you will, are at risk, and so many others are at risk of hate crimes.
What about the rhetoric in the United States with Donald Trump? That can't be helping any of this. What are your thoughts?
No, it's not helping all of it at all. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, he's an idiot. Anyway, having said that, he is removing a lot of the things, the protection things, pieces of work that have been put in place over a period of time to help secure people's livelihood and future and their rights and so on. He's stripping a lot of the rights away from people who depend on those legal right issues so that they can maintain their human rights. So I don't think he's he's a credit to the office at all.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Raymond, listen, I appreciate your time. I know this is a tough subject and it's near and dear to you, and I appreciate your passion for it as well. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Todd. Have a good day.
Okay, take care. Raymond Sheppard, African Nova Scotian social justice and human rights advocate. Former Liberal MPs walking away with hefty pensions, including Andy Fillmore. We'll get to this when we come back. All right, joining us now for a chat is Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Franco, thanks for joining the show as always.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be on.
All right, so let's talk about some of the pensions that some MPs have enjoyed, including some local ones here in Nova Scotia. Let's get into some of this.
Yeah, well, you got two former MPs from Nova Scotia who are going to be getting lifetime pensions. You've got Fillmore. He's going to be getting an annual pension starting at about $54,000 a year, totaling just over $2 million over his lifetime. The other former MP from Nova Scotia getting a pension is Daryl Sampson, right? So his starting annual pension will be about $59,000, totaling just under $2 million over his lifetime. Now, both of these MPs, right, they're going to be getting, $54,000 a year, $59,000 a year. Remember, folks, they only served as a member of Parliament for about 9 years and getting an annual pension in the tens of thousands of dollars every single year. And Todd, there's two other former MPs from Nova Scotia. Now, they won't be getting a pension because they served for 3.6 years, just over 3 years, so they're not eligible for a pension. But don't feel too bad for them because they're both going to be walking away with a severance just shy of $105,000. So those two MPs, you got Ellis, you got Perkins, again, served for a little more than 3 years, walking away with a severance just shy of $105,000.
Okay, so I guess to introduce some context to this, what type of money do you think that you would have to put away in the private sector in order to qualify or in order to guarantee yourself that type of pension? You're talking massive dollars, right?
Well, look, I mean, most people in the private sector, Todd, just to be quite frank, aren't getting a workplace pension, right? It's like 23% of private sector workers have a workplace pension. So the vast majority of people who are working outside of government, they're not covered by a workplace pension at all. And we mentioned some of those pensions for both Fillmore and Sampson, but there's some crazy, eye-popping pensions for some other former MPs. There are actually 13 former members of Parliament that will collect more than $100,000 a year in annual pension income. Right, so the highest starting pension is actually Lawrence Macaulay out there in PEI, who's going to get a starting pension of $171,000 a year.
Oh my God!
$171,000 a year. That's crazy. And folks, let's not forget how high their salaries are when they're in office. Right, a backbench member of Parliament, their salary now is just shy of $210,000. A minister's salary now is just shy of $310,000, whereas the prime minister's salary now is just shy of $420,000. So, it's not just the big pensions. There's also a severance for people who don't get a pension as a member of Parliament. That's like $105,000. And then there's just the big salaries that I mentioned. Every year their pay goes up. So, something's got to give here. We need some politicians from all the parties mind you, to, come off the bench and say, look, this isn't fair. We got to rein it in.
Yeah, and then you factor in all the additional costs of an MP, their travel, their staff. It just goes on and on and on. And how much money does it cost collectively for governance in Canada, federally, provincially, and municipally? That number would be staggering, I would bet, per capita in this country.
Oh, it's staggering. And hey, let me just point out a couple things here. One of the reasons that it's so important to dial in politician pay is because the big cost factor is the bureaucracy, right? It's half of the government's day-to-day spending goes to the federal bureaucrats. Half of the government's day-to-day spending. Well, this isn't just theory. We actually got our hands on union demands before the last big strike in Ottawa. And the bureaucrats were pointing to the fact that members of parliament give themselves a raise every single year as a reason why the bureaucracy should take more money from taxpayers. So, we have to see a culture change in Ottawa. And really the only way to start digging ourselves out of this $1 trillion debt from the federal government is for politicians to lead by example, to tighten their own belts so that they can go sell some savings to the departments.
Yeah, for sure. But we have these conversations time and time again, but nothing seems to ever happen, right?
Oh, no. I mean, look, sometimes it feels like I'm just banging my head against the wall and all I'm doing is giving myself a headache. But, this is Transparency 101. I do believe that Canadians deserve to know how their money is being spent. After all, they're the ones who are paying the bills. Now, Todd, let me just point out two more examples here where this is just outrageous. So there are 3 former MPs, 3 of them, who didn't serve for a full year. So they did not even serve as a member of parliament for a year, and they're walking away with a $105,000 severance.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Right? That's crazy. But another big one here is actually prime ministers. So a prime minister gets a member of parliament pension, but then they also get a prime minister's pension on top of it. So they're walking away with 2 pensions. So we did calculations for Trudeau. Over his lifetime, his 2 pensions will total about $8.4 million. $8.4 million in pension income over his lifetime from those 2 pensions. His MP pension will start at about $141,000 a year. His prime minister's pension will start at $73,000 a year. You add both those pensions up over his lifetime, and you're looking at $8.4 million. So, Todd, one of the things that we're calling on the federal government to do, and I think, look, I would hope that all parties could get behind this, is just to end the second pension for future prime ministers, right? They already get millions of dollars through their first pension. The least they could do is turn down, the hundreds of thousands of dollars more that they're going to get through their second pension.
Okay, quickly, we're almost out of time, but the counter argument would be this is the price you pay in order to attract good talent to run for office, and without that, you're not going to get quality people. What's your response to that?
Well, no, I actually think it's the reverse, right? Look, these people are elected to represent their constituents. There is a reason that it is called the House of Commons. And the problem that we're seeing today, where the raises go up every single year for their pay, they have these crazy pensions, they get a severance if they don't get a pension. There's also a transition allowance on top of all of that, is that you end up with these members of parliament that are completely financially divorced from the realities facing their own constituents. And it's one of the reasons where you get these policies that lead to inflation. They don't feel the pinch, really, but their constituents sure do.
Franco, always great. Appreciate it, and we'll do it again.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Federal Director. The head of a Canadian advocacy group says the past weekend marked an important step forward as the Anglican Diocese of Nova Scotia and PEI passed a resolution not to misuse non-disclosure agreements known as NDAs. We'll get to this when we come back.
Thanks.
All right. right. A reminder, of course, we will be opening the phone lines in about an hour, or in about half an hour's time, I should say. Time's getting away from me right now. And, of course, something that you can talk about is the King's visit, and is it a net gain or a net loss for this country when all is said and done? Because if it's not a net gain, why are we doing it? And I get that it's hard to measure this thing, and it's largely based on opinion, whether or not it's a net gain or a net loss. But it's something that I think is a worthy discussion. Why are we doing this, and what's the point of it? And again, I'm not a monarchist at all, but I understand that many of you are, and many of you who aren't monarchists are still excited about this and still think that it's a good thing. It's a good message, I suppose, in times of threat of our sovereignty. But anyway, this is something that you can talk about. We'll open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today. And a reminder, of course, the Science Files return today with Rob Thacker. St. Mary's University, Rob Thacker will join us between noon and 1. All right, joining me for a chat now is Julie Macfarlane of the group Can't Buy My Silence Canada. Julie, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Todd.
Okay, what is Can't Buy My Silence Canada all about?
Can't Buy My Silence was founded by myself and Zelda Perkins of the notorious Harvey Weinstein fame, as she would be very unhappy to hear, in 2021, and we did this in order to start to organize the fight against non-disclosure agreements, which are increasingly now being used in all areas of misconduct, in both workplace and civil cases, to cover up and hide the bad behavior.
Okay, so a recent decision by the Anglican Diocese of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island is passed a resolution not to misuse non-disclosure agreements, and you're a big supporter of this, obviously.
Yes, and, all kudos to the Anglicans Powering Potential movement, which tabled this resolution. There is increasingly, Todd, an effort going on across Christian communities and organizations to put out a condemnation of silencing victims about what has happened to them, which is what happens in a non-disclosure agreement, because, of course, the Christian church has been associated with many of these silencing agreements in the past. And, what we've found is that there is a real desire amongst Christian communities in Canada to make a stand on this and to say this was the wrong thing to do. We won't do it any longer, in advance of what we expect to be legislation in the next couple of years, which will actually ban the practice. But I think it's important for the Christian church to show leadership here and say, we're going to make this move before we're told we have to by the law being changed.
Is there a time when an NDA is beneficial to both parties, or is it always self-serving or one-sided?
Well, what's interesting here, Todd, is that the history shows when they were what they were originally designed for, and that did have a good purpose, which was if there was some new proprietary invention, information that hadn't yet been protected in law by a trademark or a patent, then this would be a way of stopping an employee taking that not yet protected information to a competitor. And this particularly happened in Silicon Valley in the 1980s as there was more and more development in technology. But what we've seen is their creep into being used to cover up not trade secrets, but what is sometimes called trauma secrets. And because a victim can always be protected in terms of their own privacy with a victim protective clause, a one-sided confidentiality clause that protects them, because that's what most victims want, to be private, they don't have to do it in exchange for protecting the perpetrator or the institution, which is what an NDA asks them to do. So the idea, I have never yet, Todd, come across anybody who would have preferred an NDA to a one-sided agreement that simply protects their privacy and identity, but not silencing them about what has happened to them.
Yeah, that's kind of, look, obviously people want to get restitution, if at all possible, for the
Yes.
wrongdoing to themselves, but public awareness and letting the public know that this stuff goes on and applying pressure against the perpetrator, in some cases, these churches, is a part of it, right?
Exactly. And we have talked before about this, you and I, that what at the moment happens is that the public isn't aware just how often these cases exist and they get settled, because most cases in our legal system and most cases brought in workplaces as complaints, they get resolved before there is a final, judge stepping in. And of course, that's what employers and perpetrators and churches and universities and all the other places that use NDAs, they don't want to go to court and have a judge decide, because then it will be public, if you understand me. It'll be in the public domain. So they're trying to settle these cases before they go to court, and historically they've been trying to silence the victims. But we need to know when this is happening, and people need to be able to speak who've been victimized, not on media usually. That isn't what people actually want. They only go there when they're angry because they've been silenced. They want to speak to their family, their friends, a professional counselor, a spiritual advisor, and that's what we believe should be the case when somebody settles a dispute like this.
Okay, so a pledge to ban inappropriate use of NDAs, does that mean that it'll be across the board ban, and how do we monitor this?
Well, I can't answer the question on monitoring, and it's a very good question, Todd. And it's also the reason why Can't Buy My Silence is campaigning for legislation rather than simply voluntary pledges, such as this one is. It's a very symbolic step. It shows great leadership. I think it hopefully will encourage other dioceses to pass similar resolutions. There is a resolution into the National Anglican Synod, so that would cover all Anglican churches in Canada. And I think that's a great step forward. But we really need legislation, because that's the only way that NDAs that hide misconduct and cover up malfeasance can actually be deemed illegal. And that's what we're striving for.
Okay, how about other organizations, non-religious organizations? Because unfortunately, the list goes on and on of people who've been impacted by this type of abuse. It
does. I mean, it's very difficult to find an organization or an institution that hasn't been using NDAs this way. It's become a default practice. And I think that we're seeing a move in universities. We have also a university pledge, which asks universities, which use NDAs a great deal, often to silence students who have complaints about faculty. We are asking universities to stop using NDAs. We're asking organizations generally to think about, purging their systems of non-disclosure agreements, because we don't believe that they actually help, which is what employers have believed, the reputation of these organizations. Because, of course, when it comes out that not only has there been misconduct, but it's been covered up in an NDA, well, that's 5 times as bad for their reputation as simply acknowledging a bad thing happened here and we're going to try to do better in the future. So I think that it's really seen to be increasingly counterproductive to try to hide these matters. But what we hope is that there will shortly be legislation throughout Canada. Presently, we only have it in Prince Edward Island, but it is tabled in Nova Scotia and many other parts of Canada that will make bringing a non-disclosure agreement forward to cover up misconduct illegal, and it simply won't be permitted any longer.
Julie, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Todd.
All right, take care. Julie Macfarlane of Can't Buy My Silence, Canada. The King is delivering his throne speech this morning. We'll talk to Barry MacKenzie of the Monarchist League of Canada about this when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat, it's Barry MacKenzie, the Monarchist League of Canada. Barry, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it on a very, very busy day for you, I'm sure, right?
That's okay. I'm happy to be here, Todd, anytime.
Yeah, so we're getting ready for the throne speech, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, waiting to see what the King's going to say on behalf of the government, and also, what the media is going to say in response, and perhaps what sort of a response we'll see from south of the border.
Okay, so when all is said and done, is this obviously I'm sure that you would feel that this is a net gain for the country? Why?
Absolutely.
Why is it a net gain for the country?
I mean, I think we're seeing, for one thing, we're seeing the kind of penultimate purpose of the monarchy as a political institution being fulfilled today. I mean, this is part of how it works. Typically, we see the Governor General make this speech. Today, we're seeing the sort of richest element of that constitutional system, the sort of three components all coming together and making a very strong statement. And I think it already has been making headlines around the world in a way that obviously our throne speech doesn't typically do, not something that media outlets in other countries typically pay attention to. But in the midst of this trade war, in the midst of comments being made by the president about Canada's future and sovereignty, I mean, I think we're really seeing this. We're going to see this play out in a way that I don't think we could without the sort of the soft power, that weight behind it that the king can give. And so I think we're going to see benefits there. We're seeing an interest. I'm noticing positive comments coming forth from people who aren't usually particularly positively disposed towards the institution, and it's our continued system, as it is. And I think we're seeing the monarchy do what every so often it has to do, and that's to sort of bring us together. So I hope that it continues to bear fruit for a while.
Okay, so when you talk about sovereignty, and some would suggest that by having a king that perhaps does not exercise Canada's sovereignty, what's your response to that?
I think we're talking about two separate issues here entirely. I mean, I understand that there are those people that because of the fact that we share a sovereign with other nations in the world, that's problematic for them, and I think that's a separate issue. But I don't think it says anything about a lack of sovereignty on our part. I mean, we have freely chosen. We did it in 1867. We did it again in 1982 with the patriation of the Constitution. As a series of provinces and within this federal system, and at the highest level, government have chosen to continue with this system. I mean, this is how Canada has chosen to move forward. In the future, things could perhaps change, but we are fully independent. We are sovereign. And it's not about the British king coming over and standing up to Trump on our behalf. It's about our king sort of fulfilling that particularly important position within his role as sovereign. So we're seeing it happen today. And hopefully it's going to do exactly what I suspect the Prime Minister hopes it will.
So you mentioned that standing up to Trump a couple of times, but there would be nothing said overtly, at the very least, or if at all, about Donald Trump or about the United States or tariffs or anything from the king. So you call that kind of a soft touch? Is that the way you describe that? Well,
it's soft power, but the throne speech is a little bit different. It's where the king doesn't make political statements, right? Typically, I mean, he didn't in the last number of months. Anything that he's done, it's been the use of soft power. It's by his influence. It's by what he, what sort of soft, subtle hints that he's dropping. So what we're seeing today is he's speaking on behalf of the government on the advice of the Prime Minister. And I would be very surprised if there was no, they're not going to go in there and trash talk the president, and that's not the place to do it, of course. But I think there will be messages within that throne speech that solidify and that continue to commit protecting Canada's interests in the North and more broadly, and in a variety of different ways. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out because, of course, typically, and this is the way it works in the UK, that the Prime Minister doesn't want to put words in the mouth of the King that are going to, undermine his status as an apolitical figure. But we all know that there are ways that can be done in subtle ways that can still get the message across. And I suspect that Mr. Trump will be paying attention today in a way that he probably wouldn't normally be doing when Canada was hearing the speech from the throne.
Okay, all the pomp and ceremony in the historical context, and it's a throwback, I guess, to eras in the past. Why do you think that's got such a lure, such a draw to so many people?
I think we still appreciate pomp and pageantry, and it is a throwback, of course, to old tradition. But what we were doing today, it's not new. It's not all that unusual. The pomp and pageantry is still there, whether the Governor General is reading a speech from the throne or whether it's the King himself. But I think there's an appeal to that. I mean, these are things that we're not accustomed to. Crowds still gather in front of Buckingham Palace where these things happen all the time. I think that ceremony and pageantry appeals to the human spirit in whether it's a spiritual dimension, whether it's a dimension relating to heritage and history, whether it's emotional, it's patriotic, it's just human interest. I think that's something that appeals to us and that gets us excited. And that's what makes this day a little bit extra special because the King is here to do it himself. And as the happy-looking crowds at Lansdowne Park and at Rideau Hall suggested yesterday, there are Canadians who are delighted to be there to to welcome him in person as much as they can, and I suspect we'll see similar crowds in Ottawa today as we prepare for the speech.
Yeah, and of course the King's had health issues, but he certainly looks like he's healthy and good to go right now. That's for sure. He looks like he's on his game.
Yeah, absolutely, and he has done for the last number of months. I mean, he's, the health setback was certainly a complication for lots of things, but he's shown through his whole life that he's committed to, putting the best foot forward and doing whatever is asked of him. Because at the end of the day, it's always us, it's the people that he's serving, whether here, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, wherever. That's what he's out there doing, the things that a government or that an organization asks him to do. So this time we did the big ask, and we asked him to come for the biggest moment. So looking forward to see how all that plays out later. Okay,
the relationship between Mark Carney and the King seems to be very warm, and it seems to be that's at play here, I think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right, Todd. I mean, it's hard to know how long this has been in the works, and this is maybe Mr. Trudeau made overtures. These conversations could have been happening, and there was a hope certainly last year that there was going to be a royal tour, which of course the King's illness kind of put paid to. But I really do think, given the short nature of this tour, this suggests to me that it didn't. This is not something that's been planned for a year or something. We know that it's because it's associated with the opening of Parliament. This is something I'm sure that Mr. Carney has pushed for, especially in light of what's going on geopolitically. And we look forward to a chance when the King can come back and with the Queen spend a bit more time in Canada, meeting people outside of the National Capital Region. But I suspect that personal relationship certainly helps. And it's great to see it on display, and a King and a Prime Minister comfortable with one another, because that's supposed to be how it works.
And I would think that it goes a long way in sowing ties to the young generations as well. I'm watching video now in Ottawa, and there's infants out, there's young kids, there's school, there's teenage kids, there's school kids, and that generational outreach. I don't think you could make that up any other way.
No, you can't. And the diversity in the crowd as well. I mean, there's often this sense that, the monarchy matters to an old white Canada, a Canada in which there was less diversity and all these sorts of things. But the crowd suggests that that's not what it's about. It's not about whether you have British ancestry or not. It's about whether or not you see value in the institution, or that you see value in ceremony. So it's wonderful to see new Canadians. It's wonderful to see people of all different ages, men and women. It's just wonderful to see people out and taking an interest in this and being there for what is a pretty rare moment in history. The speech from the throne may be kind of humdrum typically, but this doesn't, having the King there to do it in person doesn't happen very often. So hoping that all goes very smoothly and that people people remember this for a long time.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to me to be too many dissenting voices. At least if there are, they're not giving a platform right now to be dissenting. And I suppose why do you think that is?
I think partly it's because here we recognize there's an opportunity. I mean, this tour has a purpose. In a way that, some of the more dissenting voices may suggest that, they don't often, that they're just about costing a bunch of money. And obviously I disagree with that at the best of times. But I think in this context, even the naysayers recognize, I've been talking to a few friends who including one in particular yesterday, who asked if I was excited about all that was going on, and they confessed that they were too, and they're a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, small r Republican, and they sort of admitted to the little bit of excitement too, I think, because they recognize that there's a purpose behind all of this. So it's I think that has a lot to do with why we're not hearing a lot of dissenting voices, but we just soldier on and we see what comes of it.
Yeah, and of course, people who are dissenters, or even people who are soft dissenters, are paying attention and are curious.
Exactly. It's a real learning moment, I think, for a lot of us, Todd, because the issue with an institution that we share with countries all around the world is that we don't get to see them in the flesh very often. And even, a lot of us don't see a lot of the work that happens at government houses across the country. We don't see what the lieutenant governors are up to. We don't see how this institution works for us. And when it's in the public eye and people all around the world are watching, as they seem to be today, that reminds us that, hey, this institution does work for us. And it's a great chance for people who haven't been paying attention or haven't taken an interest to maybe learn a little bit about why it works. At the end of the day, they may still disagree, and that's fine too, but it's a chance for us to see how it all works and to learn a little bit of something, and how perhaps it continues to serve us today. So I think it's great and delighted to see people taking such an interest.
Okay, Barry, appreciate it. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Todd.
All right,
cheers.
Take care. Barry MacKenzie, Monarchist League of Canada. Now, what is on your mind? Well, perhaps you might want to weigh in on this. Perhaps you have a dissenting voice and you've been looking for a platform to speak out against this. Or perhaps you're a strong proponent and you love everything that's going on and you agree with everything Barry said. Give us a call. Or perhaps you get some other things to talk about, Nova Scotia Power and this privacy breach, and it's very, very serious. And did you receive a letter? Are you impacted by it? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, folks, we got lots of open lines for you. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? Again, 902-405-6000. Perhaps you might want to weigh in on or not King Charles and Queen Camilla here in Canada for another bit of a day, part of the day today before they jet back to England and delivering the throne speech. Are you paying attention to this? Is this something that has your interest? And is the King's visit a net positive for Canada? And if so, why? Or why not if you don't think that it is? Because look, it's cost the country a lot of money, and there's an investment in this. But again, as Barry MacKenzie discussed earlier in the previous segment, that it brings some value to the country. I think that we would be remiss if we didn't say there's some value to this. But is it a net gain? And is it some type of message to Donald Trump and in the face of tariffs and in the face of threats to our sovereignty? Do you feel as though that's the case? Soft power, I think, was the term that Barry used. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on this? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Also, something pressing and more, I think, impactful to many of us is the fact that letters have been received by upward to 300,000 people, Nova Scotia Power customers, warning them of this cyber breach, and their information may have been impacted by this. Have you received this letter? And if you have, how concerned are you, and what are your thoughts on it? What are you doing to protect your privacy? What tips might you have for the rest of us? What can you do? I suppose you could contact your bank, or probably the best way to go, if you can, is to go into your bank, because then you're presenting yourself visually, and you will have to provide them with perhaps some ID, and you could put some safeguards on your account. I don't know. What are you doing to protect your banking information and your personal information? Have you signed up for the credit monitoring services that Nova Scotia Power is providing for 2 years as a result of this? When all is said and done, folks, Nova Scotia Power, they have, as we know and we talked about endlessly on the show, has a complete monopoly on this province. It's not like you can go to Acme Power Company and sign up. This is all if you want power, you have to go through this company. So how much blowback will it receive? And in the face of that blowback, it's not as though they're going to lose any customers, because they can't. Now, we have reached out to Nova Scotia Power and offered them the opportunity to come on the show, and to this point, we've not heard from them. I unfortunately don't anticipate that we will hear from them, although I think they should come on the show and talk about it and let everybody know what they are doing to beef up their systems. How much money are they investing into their security as a result of this? Why were they not proactive and doing so in the first place? And what about your information with other organizations? We've heard of municipalities being impacted, health authorities being impacted, breached, schools. On and on it goes with companies and people out there every single day looking to target vulnerabilities and find those vulnerabilities and get your information to rip you off. That, unfortunately, is the world that we're living in, folks. So what are your thoughts on this? Have you received a letter from Nova Scotia Power? Have you been impacted by this? And how confident are you that organizations like Nova Scotia Power are doing all they can to protect your information? You can imagine the costs associated with protecting the information would be massive. And unfortunately, the criminals have deep, deep pockets, and there's massive, massive money in this. And you've got very, very highly intelligent people out there manipulating these systems. And trying to stay one step ahead of this would be a monumental task for sure. But nonetheless, if companies are going to ask for your personal information, they should be doing all that they can to protect it. And do you think that they are? I would suggest that probably many of them are not. I would suggest that many are asleep at the switch. The CRA's been hacked, for goodness sakes. So there's that. Or whatever else you've got in your mind. 902-405-6000. And, of course, traffic here in HRM. It was a story yesterday. It would not come as a surprise to most that Vancouver and Toronto take the top 2 spots for worst traffic in Canada. But the third city on the podium is HRM. That's right, folks. Little old HRM out here in the East Coast. We're third worst traffic in Canada, according to the 2024 TomTom Traffic Index, company that analyzes traffic information across the globe. And cities are ranked based on the average times it takes to travel 10 clicks to the city in the city center. In Halifax, that number is 24 minutes, up 50 seconds from 2023 as compared to 25 minutes in Toronto and 27 minutes in Vancouver. That's hard to believe. So how frustrating is traffic for you in HRM, in particular on the peninsula? And in the end, what can you do about it, folks? I would suggest that there's nothing really anybody can do about it besides grin and bear it. But as the city continues to expand and grow, and the infrastructure is what it is, the road infrastructure is what it is. It's not as though things are going to change. Now they're working on the Cogswell interchange on the peninsula, which is going to be, when completed, a much better situation. But when they get working on that Winter Street Exchange, you can be guaranteed that's going to cause some severe backlogs. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. All right, let's kick it off with Catherine. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, how are you this morning?
I'm well, you?
No, not too bad. I'm calling... too bad. I called the power company, and they, of course, told... I asked them what information they had on the bill is in my husband's name, and they said all they had was our address and his birth date. But to call that other number that everybody's to call, I called the other number, got a gentleman, and he started out to tell me that to do this online. And I'm old, I'm very old, and I don't do things online very often. And I said, look, I am not going to do it. I can't do it, and I won't. So he was very nice. And he took the information himself, and that was the end of it. So that was my experience with this hullabaloo.
Yeah. Are you concerned about your husband's information?
Well, I don't know. Our information today is all over the world. Everybody knows about us. I think there's somebody in China probably listening to this conversation this very minute. My mother was elderly, and when she'd go into a bank or a place and she'd see these computers, she used to say, it's like old so-and-so, some old man used to make a comment, it's dealings with the devil. And it's all evil, all this computer. We're joined up all over the world, and everybody knows about us, and what can we do?
That's right. You can't do anything about it. Thanks for the call.
That's just how I feel. Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Gary, hello.
Yes, I'm about Ukraine and Russia. You know, all the NATO countries and United States need to go and attack Russia because he's not going to stop. Russia is not going to stop. He's going to keep fighting with Ukraine. He's going to kill all he's another Hitler, I call him.
Well, I don't know that you're going to see that happen. I can't see it happening unless he proceeds into Poland or another NATO country. I would say that then all bets are off, I would suggest.
Why United States try and have peace, try and have a ceasefire and peace or something, and Russians don't want to stop.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's interesting. Donald Trump was praising Putin in many ways in the past, but he's changed his tone because obviously Putin, you can't trust the guy.
That's right. And you see on TV and all these young people getting killed. It makes you mad.
Yeah, absolutely, it does, and it's horrific, and it's extremely sad for sure, Gary.
Yes, it is. I see that, and I got one. I got two live in my apartment near here. From Ukraine. I said, a shame. See what your country going through. I say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Gary, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Jeff's giving us a call. Wants to talk about Nova Scotia Power. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Not too bad, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, so I got a letter, like a lot of other people, and I followed the instructions. I went to the website, mytrueidentity.ca, and I filled out the required blocks, necessary information required for them to do what they're going to do, monitor my credit, what have you. One of the last requests was for my social insurance number, and I know I'm not obligated to give them that information. It says right on the web page that, although it's not necessary, it will help us identify who you are and give you better, accurate information regarding your credit. We strongly advise you do this. So I hummed and hawed, and first I wasn't going to do it, and then I was like, you know what? This is important. I may as well put it in, and they'll know who I am. I'll get a accurate feedback or whatever.
Yeah.
So I put it in, press enter, red font came up on the screen. Sorry, we cannot verify who you are. My God. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I called today because I forgot to call yesterday, but I called today because it says, do you have an issue to call this number? So I called the number. I was on hold for, 10 minutes, and it kept prompting me, if you'd like to keep holding, press 1. If you want to call back, press 2. And I pressed 1 probably about 11 times, but this little recording goes on for about 20 seconds, and then they play some music, and then about 30 seconds later, they give you the same font, like, do you want to wait or do you want to have a callback? It's very annoying, very frustrating. I'm sure they do that in hopes that people will just press and call you back at their availability type of thing, which I've done, and I'm currently waiting for them to call me back. So I'm really confused. I hope my credit's not affected because of this, but we'll find out.
Yeah, for sure. It's disconcerting when you because look, I'm skeptical of anything now. When you go to a website and you punch in information, I'm skeptical of everything now, and quite honestly, I'm afraid of my privacy being breached.
Yes, I was skeptical and worried too, and like, gee, should I put my social insurance number in? I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't heard, but I did end up doing it. In the search bar there, it showed like a lock, so I'm assuming it's a safe, secure based on that lock. Yeah. But totally off topic, but this is something that's been bothering me, and I'm just going to run it by you and then I'll let you go. But I've been noticing a lot of cars in the city with tinted windows and graphics on their windows and even the side of their cars of these guys from the Middle East with AK-47s.
What do you mean, like
brandishing guns? Like just like a vinyl decal taped or
I see.
On the car
with the decal, yeah, not real AK-47.
No, a guy with a headdress and a AK-47, whatever. I mean, we're a city, and we don't promote violence. I'd like to see our police force start pulling these people over and asking them to remove it, because honestly, I had my young Todd in the car with me one day, and he's like, why does that guy have guns on his car, Dad? It's like, I'm not sure, buddy. Yeah. Like that, I shouldn't have to answer that question to my child.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jeff, you just cut out. You just cut out.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, anyway, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Okay,
thanks for the call. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Ian, hello.
Hello. Just want to talk about Nova Scotia Power and maybe our roads really quickly.
Sure.
I have not seen any leadership from our government to say, Nova Scotia Power, you're accountable for not following certain security practices and standards. I know we have a utility board that likes to rubber stamp everything as far as our rate increases, but maybe they should push back and impose penalties for Nova Scotia Power to follow cybersecurity compliance. Also, I'm a musician and I do cybersecurity for a living. I was up and I drove to Ontario, and as soon as you hit Ontario, there's these big signs that says speeding over 150 kilometers per hour, you're going to get a $10,000 penalty for speeding. And there's cameras everywhere. People are joking. I was saying, wow, people use their signal lights in Ontario, but in Nova Scotia, we don't do that. So to fix our speeding issues, we need to get with the times and start putting in, photo radar and use that type of technology, which I have not seen Tim Houston or any forms of government address either of these issues.
Yeah, I think first of all on the Nova Scotia Power thing, yeah, it would be nice if the government stood up and pushed them a bit, because it's not as though people have a choice to go anywhere else for power. This is a complete and total monopoly on this whole thing. So a government advocate would be great. I would agree with that. And as far as the photo radar goes and the red light cameras and all that, I have no idea why we're not moving in this direction. I know that there's some naysayers out there that suggest the technology would be expensive, and people say that license plates might be hard to be detected. Some of the plates are in dilapidated condition, but these are things that we could overcome. People do it in other jurisdictions, as you pointed out, Ian.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I would just like to see more leadership from the government. I haven't heard boo. I haven't seen anything on social media or on your show.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone from a politician coming up saying, let's hold Nova Scotia Power accountable for, to not encrypt and mask all that data in the back end, to get too nerdy. I mean, that's pretty standard practice, and they should have, audits and a third party penetration tests come in, try to hack into the systems. Of course, they're not being very transparent of what their standards are, but it's definitely lacking if someone can come in and get that data. And we haven't heard in 2 months. This happened 2 months ago, and now we're just finding out. I get a letter in the mail to sign up to monitor my credit. Mm-hmm. It seems like I get one of these letters every few years from various companies. But have
you done so? Have you signed up for the monitoring services?
Yeah, it's like any other ones that the cybersecurity guys. Every few years, Nova Scotia Health had a cyber incident. Yeah, a few other companies, but yeah, it's pretty standard. They just monitor your credit. I'd like to see more as far as identity theft. There's an option, but you need to pay for that. So right. I think Nova Scotia Power should also be paying that.
Okay, and thanks for the call, pal.
All right.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Scott, you want to talk about Nova Scotia Power as well? Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good vitamin D day, though.
Yeah, nice and sunny.
Yes, sir. So with Nova Scotia Power, with you trying to get them on your show, silence says a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
They're under the gun. They're trying to hopefully try and fix all this. I just came back from my bank this morning, as a matter of fact, and I did get a letter, and towards the bottom, Todd, it said, while we have no evidence of misuse of your personal information as a precautionary measure and arrangements have been made to go through this TransUnion thing. Now, a gentleman just a couple people ago there on your show said that he did that, and he made the decision to give out his social insurance number. And again, I talked about this last week, banks, government job. So not saying he did the wrong thing. He made a decision I thought was right for him, but it denied him.
Yeah.
Said something red flag come up and it wouldn't go.
No, he put it in. He put the social insurance number in and it still denied him.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, it still denied him.
Yeah.
So there's a glitch going on there somewhere. So he might want to look into that too. I'm going to sign up for it, and when it comes to that, I'm going to not put my social insurance number and see what happens. Well, when I went to my bank today, we get a bill in the mail. and we pay it on through their app. Now, they said at the bank that it's more unlikely that can get hacked than if you do it the other way, and which I don't know. I've always paid my power bill the way I'm paying it now. What they recommended to me is that if you have any accounts that you have in your bank, like with money in them, she said, if you don't use those accounts and you just put money in it for savings and stuff like that, put a freeze on it, lock it.
Yeah.
And then if you want the money, then you come back in, you unlock it, take some money out, and you can relock it right in again.
That's good advice. That's really good advice.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Yeah.
But like, we have to keep some money in a checking account for expenses and bills to pay, right?
Yeah.
But she also told me that just keep a very diligent eye on your ins and outs, like your debits and your credits in there from now on for a while. And they have parameters and things in place to watch that also in the bank, that if they see there must be something that will flag something if it looks like it's way out of whack.
Yeah.
If it's way out of whack, they have things in place that they can watch to do, and then so we could get our money back. Yeah. So some people are, that older couple that
lost the $30,000,
$30,000. That's just disheartening.
Yeah.
That's just disheartening. It could be any one of us.
Yep, absolutely.
What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. And look, it's I recently I went to the bank and get some work done by a contractor and had to get a money order, and it was a significant chunk of change out of the money order. And I had to go in there, and they asked me for identification, and they asked me security questions, and it took a bit of time. But I want them to do that. I want them to I want their due diligence and to be as careful as they can. Right?
Absolutely. It's your money.
Yep.
Yeah, it's your future. It's your day to day. It's everything. Yep. I just hope that everybody out there just keeps being diligent, because Nova Scotia being the monopoly era, they don't give a rat's ass about us. But they just want their money, and their shareholders get their money, and everybody gets their money. Yep. And I just hope that they do take an offer maybe to your show to come and at least answer a few questions, because silence says a lot.
Indeed. Okay, Scott, thanks for the call. Good advice.
Thanks, bro.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Back to the phone. Talk to David. Hello, David.
Hi, Todd. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the proposed Golden Dome that Donald Trump is advocating. I sort of caught the tail end of your conversation with Scott Taylor, and you guys sort of did a good job going over, whether or not this is sort of a good expenditure in terms of our other defense priorities, which may be sort of a more immediate. When I first heard about this, I was concerned because it was the reports that came out and sort of the conversation you had and sort of stuff since is that basically it's unlike a sort of ground-launched or an air-launched system. This is actually a weaponized space-based platform that you'll put weapons in space and use those to shoot down incoming missiles. So I think that just raises all kinds of problems. I mean, your airspace, your ground, that's your sovereign territory, but who owns space? And I mean, when do you shoot these missiles down? When they're sort of on their terminal track, towards sort of your nation, or do you shoot them down over the country of origin? And if you have the capability of shooting down missiles over their country of origin, you got the capability of shooting down other things as well, too. So it's not just a defensive space-based weapons platform, it's a space-based weapons platform. And sort of, it's all well and good when the United States controls it, but what about when the Chinese and the Russians send up theirs too? And then what happens when there are, problems start to, what if something happens to go wrong with that? So it's just sort of, when we have the ability to sort of limit these things by treaty, because, we don't really want it, the Russians don't really want it, the Chinese don't really want it, and we can just agree not to do it. I think it would just be a much better thing for the human race. So, it just seems like a reckless proposal. But as you guys went over, too, just to sort of, 3 years to roll this out and have it reliable and working and something that's going to justify the cost, that's not going to happen. And anyway, so, I just hope Mark Carney, I guess it's one thing to just entertain Donald Trump in this right now and hope that his generals kind of advise him against it. But, if it's something they seriously push for, then I hope Mark Carney will stand ground and say, we don't want any part of it.
Yeah, I think you raised some valid points, David. Some things that we should definitely be considering, and I don't know that we are, but I think I agree with what you're saying. I think you make some valid points.
Yeah, and I don't say that as if it was a ground launch or an air launch system, I would actually be fairly supportive of that. My understanding is that's what Patriot missiles are intended to do and seem to do it quite well. So I'm not sure what the gaps are that in the coverage that they could provide. But this is just a whole other step and like a whole other level. And, we have treaties against the sort of weaponization of space, and this is just a really dangerous precedent that we don't need to go down. So, thanks for your time, Todd.
Okay, pal. Thanks. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. Marilyn's giving us a call. Hello, Marilyn.
Hi, Todd. Well, I just wanted to call because I, too, received a letter from Nova Scotia Power, and I did go on, fill out the online form, and put in my SIN number, which I was leery about doing, but I did it, and no problem. It came up with my name, activated, my credit score came up. I don't know how they would know that soon, but anyway. And the other point was the way I interpreted my letter was that Nova Scotia Power is paying for this 24-month subscription to all the subscribers.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully, I don't know if you can register without the SIN number. I just saw it and put it in. Maybe I could have done it without, but anyway, that's all I had to say on that matter.
Okay, Marilyn.
So, thank you.
Do you feel peace? Do you have peace of mind now that you've done that? Does that give you some peace of mind?
Well, I guess I do, but in this world we live in, is anything 100%? But hopefully it will prevent someone from hacking into my accounts. But I mean, if they're providing the service, I think, well, why not?
Yeah, for
it's better to do it than not do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people only have until the 30th of September to use that activation code. Mm-hmm. So that's also, there's quite a lot of info in the letter. I'm sure, I don't know if you got one or not.
I got one.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for
Marilyn.
your time.
Okay, thanks so much. Take care. 902-405-6000. Mary wants to talk about Nova Scotia Power. Hello, Mary.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, the train.
I have to wait and see.
Yeah.
The question I was wondering is about the smart meters. Now, that's something they've been installing those for, I don't know how many years now. They're not that old. But I'm wondering if something like this could they get into like people's smart meters?
I don't think so. I really don't think that I shouldn't say that. I don't think that would be what they'd be looking for. I think that the information, the banking information, and the credit card information, and the personal identity would be of much more value than anything in the smart meter.
All right. No, I was thinking more like for terrorism attacks and things like that.
Yeah,
Mary, when they get into systems and.
Yeah, I really don't know, Mary. I would suggest that that's probably not something that you should worry about, but I don't know for sure. So I guess you could take that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just put it on the list then.
Okay, Mary. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Claude wants to weigh in on Nova Scotia Power. Hello, Claude.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm well. You?
I'm awesome. It won't take long, but I turned on the radio and heard everybody talking about it. And on Friday, me and my wife were driving. She got a credit monitoring email saying that a credit card had just been approved. And sure enough, when we checked out her credit, there was a credit card from MBNA Bank for a $2,000 limit approved on her credit check. And so when we called, the credit card company, they said, yeah, it's already been mailed to you, and they canceled it, but they gave us a bunch of directions. So we called the RCMP, which is one of the things they told us to do. And the RCMP guy literally said, the social insurance numbers were got in the Nova Scotia Power League. Wow. And that's probably where they got it. So when you first enroll with Nova Scotia Power, so it worked out good. We shut the credit card down, but it's already happening. So I thought that was crazy that it was already being taken advantage of.
Yeah, and not only that, but then it makes you wonder what's next, right? And how vigilant can you be, or do you have to remain? That's you feel violated, right?
Yeah, well, it's already done, and if we didn't check it, we didn't have we're enrolled in 2 or 3 different credit monitoring just because you get free stuff with it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have known. So, and the funny thing is, they had applied for a higher limit credit card first, and it didn't get auto approved. But this one did get auto approved. So people should check their credit and see if there's hits on it.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Anyway, Claude, thanks. Good thing you're vigilant. Thank you. All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's another example right there, folks. Bill, hello.
Hi, Todd. I had an interesting morning. Went down to Pier 21. I hadn't been there since the farmers market. In fact, the last time I was there, I shook hands with Prince Charles and Camilla. But I went down to the once-a-year Ports Canada talking about what they done and didn't do and money-wise and so on and so forth. Pretty short and sweet. But I got my little plug, and mostly they just wanted questions, answers to questions. But I brought up about Greenbank, and I said, how many people? Oh, about 60. How many people heard tell Greenbank? Only about 6. So I give my little spiel about Greenbank and also about painting the grain elevator. So I got a little good feedback on it afterwards. Some of the ones who were involved, especially the grain elevator lady in charge, liked some of the ideas. So maybe we'll get some action, some good advertisement, some touristy stuff there. So then they were very good. They had a big feed down there and sent me home in a taxi with a pile of food, and so happy morning.
Well, that's good, Bill. It sounds like you had a good time. That's great. Good for you.
It wasn't just that, though, but I could see a little bit of change. I mean, I said you should have more people, not just waiting to ask a question, but to give me some ideas and so on. So it was a good morning. I appreciate it. I come home with a little pile of sweets and goodies, which I shouldn't have anyway, diabetic. You're doing a good job, Todd.
Okay, Bill. Thanks, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Jordan, hello.
Hey, Todd. How's it going?
Well, you?
Good. Just want to comment on the King stuff there. I just don't understand how anybody would have any interest in it at all. Why do we, Canada, have a British king, or like king to who? He's not my king.
Yeah.
I think it's like, who pays for him to come over? Our tax dollars?
Oh, yes, absolutely, your tax dollars. You can be guaranteed he's not paying a dime for it.
No, like the members of Parliament are all going to be out there. They should be working on plans to make life better for Canadians, not honoring the King of Britain. I don't know. I don't see how people can waste their time on that.
Well, look, I tend to lean towards that point of view as well, Jordan, to be honest with you, and I don't make a secret of it, but look, I get that some people are enamored by it and thrilled by it, but I tend to agree with what you're saying, Jordan, so I'm not gonna pretend all of a sudden that I'm a monarchist for a day because the king's in the country.
Yeah, I didn't. Apparently, he's leaving today or tomorrow.
He's leaving today. Yeah. We flew our Airbus over to get him and bring him over. So it's 4 trips in the Airbus over to England and back, because they're back and there and back again.
Well, that must be good for the climate.
Yeah, there you go. He's supposedly a climate champion. Yeah, right. Give me a break.
And the other thing is that Nova Scotia Power, that's pretty crazy that they're hacked in and they're taking people's and already getting credit cards sent out and stuff. It's
just the beginning, Jordan. Unfortunately, I think that's just the very beginning of all this.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have an account with Nova Scotia Power, so
yeah,
I feel for them.
Okay, pal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Annette and back to the phones. Annette says, regarding Nova Scotia Power, says, as many others, I'm concerned with the breach from a personal aspect as a customer, but there's another level to this. As a business owner that supplies goods to Nova Scotia Power, they are paid solely by EFTs. This means that my company's bank info is breached. This is very, very serious. Of course, EFT is electronic funds transfer. And yeah, I could see why that would be an added layer to all of this. And that's a good point. All the businesses that have banking information with Nova Scotia Power, they're breached as well, and hadn't really given that any consideration, but that's a good comment. I shouldn't say all, but some certainly. 902-405-6000. Chris has given us a call. Hello, Chris.
Good morning, Todd. I didn't really call to talk about Nova Scotia Power, but that seems to be the hot topic today. I enjoyed your interview with Franco Terrazzano. That's quite an eye-opener on this pension scheme, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
Man, oh man! I know you had made the comment that with the high salaries, and I've heard many people make it over the years that if we don't offer high salaries to these politicians, we're not going to get qualified people. Well, unless I've been asleep at the wheel for the last 30 years, which I don't think I have, we're not getting quality people even with the big pay and salaries.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these people are going after the benefits and the big salaries because they can't in any way, shape, or form in private industry or out in the real world, they can't generate that kind of an income. They don't have the smarts, the qualifications, the abilities to do that. So they're going into politics to try and take the easy road once they get there. That's my opinion on it anyway. But Nova Scotia Power, yeah, I got my letter. I think they must have sent it to everybody that's got an account.
Yeah, I think that's probably safe to say.
Yeah. And I think they've got several 100,000 different accounts, both commercial and residential here in Nova Scotia, if I'm not mistaken, 300,000 or 400,000. Mm-hmm. And they're going to pay $25 a month for credit monitoring for the next 2 years for those that want it, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I did understand.
That's correct.
Well, that concerns me in a way in that if they're offering 2 years of credit monitoring services, they must figure it's going to be a hell of a while to get this mess cleaned up, and that the risk to the customers is going to be here for at least 2 more years.
Well, it will be. I mean, why wouldn't it be? I mean, these companies, these hackers could sit on the information for 5 years if they wanted to.
That's right.
Yeah.
They exactly could. Now, you're a lot younger than me, and you're more computer savvy, I'm sure, so you probably do a lot of things with your phone and with your computer that I don't, but I don't pay any bills over my computer. I don't have a phone that does that or whatever. I just don't use a smartphone. I have an old flip phone that works just fine for me. And also my accounts with Nova Scotia Power have been there for about 45 years. So I don't know at the time how much information I would have had to give them at the time. I don't recall ever giving them my social insurance number. Mm-hmm. And I know years ago it was a lot easier to get power and to get credit and everything else without going through a lot of the hoops and barrels that you have to jump through today to get it. So I don't know in my case or any customers that are older how much information there'd be there anyway. But any for these hackers would be too much. But I got a quick question for you, Todd.
Yeah.
If you were charged with a crime and you appeared before a judge and the judge turned to the prosecution and said, do you, the prosecution, feel this person is guilty? And the prosecution said, yes, we do. And the judge said, good, that's good enough for me. How would you feel about that?
Like justice has not been served.
Exactly. Well, to underscore what the counselors yesterday were saying, that's exactly the way they're behaving. When it comes to contracts, financial dealings with the city, they admitted themselves they don't have the time to look at all the contracts. They were talking with Gloria about these scooters.
Yeah.
I think it's high time for them to look at the contract, because my analogy or my example with the judge is a bit extreme. I don't think you would ever see that happen, but I think the principle is the same and the comparison is the same in that that's what these counselors are doing. They're looking to staff and basically saying, well, do you think this is a good idea? Staff's nodding their head or giving it the rubber stamp, yes, and counsel gives it the rubber stamp and doesn't look at it again. I mean, that's not what we're hiring these people for, and I think people should be outraged that our tax dollars, and these guys are making pretty big salaries. They're not out of this world salaries, but they're still pretty big salaries, a lot more than most Nova Scotians make, and they're not doing their due diligence when it comes to spending our money. That's one reason we've got $93 million in bicycle lane, up from a 25, and like you said yesterday, by the time this thing is said and done, it'll be a hell of a lot more than... I wouldn't be surprised if they continue down this road by the time it's done, in 3 more years or 4 more years, whatever, that it'll be 120, 125 million if they continue to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just people should wake up, and people just don't talk about it, Todd, or I don't see that they do. I mean, your show is one of the few forums that we in Nova Scotia have here to bitch about our complaints with people and our whatever, and it's very important, and I certainly value it, and I know a lot of people enjoy it. enjoy listening to it and value it as well. But we've got to look at this situation, and I think we need a mechanism whereby we, the taxpayer, could get rid of some of these councillors if we're not happy with their performance and not have to wait 3 or 4 years down the road for another friggin' election. What do you think?
Well, perhaps. Look, it's complicated. I get the council can't look at every single contract and be on top of every single thing, but it does seem to be a recurring theme when they're asked about details that they don't have any details on much when they're on when they come in here in studio. But that said, I get that it's tough to have your fingers on everything, and it's anyway, Chris, I get it. Thanks for the call. I got a boogie.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
pal.
you, Todd.
Take care. All right, let's talk to let's see. Joe, hello.
Hey, Todd, how you doing, man?
Well, you?
Good. I know you're doing better than well because we live in Nova Scotia.
There you go.
I just wanted to talk about Nova Scotia Power, and I listen to your show a lot, and it seems a lot of the people that have been targeted, and I haven't received a letter from Nova Scotia Power, so I'm assuming my account wasn't one of the ones that was consumed by these hackers, but it seems a lot of the people seem to be pretty aged. I don't mean to discriminate or anything like that, but it seems a lot of the people that are calling seem to be of an age, let's just say past 50. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard a lot of young people. So I don't know if that's part of the scheme in terms of these hackers, targeting maybe a demographic. But how many millions of dollars do we send to California for a mirror? And they offer up a little bit of protection. It's almost like, yeah, whatever. It's Nova Scotia. Who cares? You know what I mean? From their perspective. Yeah. So, it sucks that the province sold the Nova Scotia Power. That was years ago. But now we're realizing how, I don't know. I don't want to say stupid, but how idiotic it was to actually sell Nova Scotia Power. I mean, like, we have no recourse in terms of, issuing problems. I mean, like power outages, old lines. It's a fix and wipe up kind of situation. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the King coming, and I'm kind of with you on we need ties, we need relationships, and this is, I think, a good step for us, no matter what. I mean, like, I'm not bowing down or anything like that. But I think this is actually a positive thing for Canada and for our own sovereignty. And, I can't discount that. And that's basically all I have to say.
Okay,
Todd.
Joe.
And I hope you enjoy the sunshine, dude.
Okay.
And I hope everybody else there does. And you know what? All the callers today and the last couple of days, I think, have been, pretty decent.
Okay, thanks,
Much
Joe.
applause.
Appreciate it.
Right
Take
on.
care. All right, take care. George, you got to be a minute or less. I want to get you on because you've been on hold. Go ahead quickly, George, though.
Hi, good morning. Todd, is there any learned people out there that would know if a class action lawsuit could go ahead against Nova Scotia Power for negligence?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure, but that's something that we could definitely follow up on, the legalities of this. Perhaps we'll reach out to Wayne McKay or somebody like that.
Somebody should know. And also a news flash for you. I'm just looking at TV. Former Mayor Savage is sitting right there in Parliament looking at the King.
Yeah, I see Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper, and they brought all the old gang back together for this.
On your taxpayer dollars.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Are you happy?
Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, George.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
take
you,
care.
sir.
All right, take care. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Rob Thacker and the Science Files when we come back. All right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, give us a call. Science related, of course. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University. 902-405-6000. Rob Thacker, hello.
Hey, Todd's in the chair.
I know. I was late. But as I like to think, they can't start without me.
No, we can't. In fact, I couldn't even press a button.
There you go. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. The Science Files. We got Rob till 1 o'clock, and we're competing with this throne speech day, Rob.
No, Charles? Yes.
Are you a monarchist?
I'm not. My mum was. My mum was a huge fan of the monarchy. So remember, long time ago, Silver Jubilee for Queen Elizabeth. And Mum made us all dress up. So I'm like, yeah, okay. It's a thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What about in the UK, in England? Is this still pretty massive, or
it's kind of split, I think, somewhat in the UK. Although you got to remember, it's a long time since I was really living in the UK, so nearly 30 years, which is bonkers. But anyway, but certainly amongst my friends growing up, there were some who were like, yeah, it's a good thing, and there were some who were less so. So it's always been divided. So.
Yeah, and of course the pomp and ceremony. Some people absolutely love that, that tradition.
Well, I think there is something to be said for traditions, right? I think those can be kind of like a social cohesion to a certain extent. I mean, some people will argue that they actually promote problems in social situations sometimes, but certainly there's a number of things that you become part of the culture and you relate to, and so they are I don't know. I mean, it would be hard not to look at the UK and say that a big part of it really does come down to the history of kings and queens of the country.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. 902-405-6000. I'm trying to think of some science-related angle to all this, but I'm not. I'm drawing a blank. I really would love to use this topic. There you go, if that's such a term.
Well, I mean, Charles was known for talking to his plants, so I've not got much on that.
Yeah, and do not get political, but Charles was considered an environmentalist, which I find a little ironic considering the size of his palaces and his estates, and the fact that we sent an Airbus over there to pick him up and all that jazz. But what are your thoughts on him and the environmental angle?
So I think it is actually reasonable to pin an environmental label on him. He has been fairly outspoken about a number of these issues over the years. I mean, we could get into like how his estates are managed and the overall green standards that he actually runs them to. I mean, that would be reasonable. I mean, if someone's going to be sort of like promoting sustainable approaches and they aren't actually enabling them themselves. But I don't know. He may well have done that. I honestly don't know. So that would be something we'd have to sit down and research. But I think it is good to have a figurehead like that saying things. I mean, people will always say, well, you can afford to do it, right? But I think that is actually a key part of the equation, because when you look at where most emissions come from, it tends to be the richest people, right? I mean, there's an inevitable fact there. They have a lot more resources. They do a lot more things. They travel a lot more and so on. Like, I mean, we've seen people calling out private jet emissions as like a big thing. So, I mean, I like that he says things, but at the same time, he's got to be held to a standard on it as well.
Yeah, 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. I often say that people's carbon footprint is directly linked to their, and not in every case, but I would agree that in many cases, that the more money you make and the more resources you can have, people will probably have. If you make $200,000, your chances of having a bigger carbon footprint are more than if you make $40,000, probably, right?
For sure. I mean, and so you can take this to its extreme limit, and you can actually talk about the kinds of societies that we live in, right? And if you look at basically, I don't know, sustainable farming in sub-Saharan Africa and places like that, their carbon footprints are minimal. Right, and that has actually been a significant argument, because people have always said, certain people, not everyone, certain people said, oh, it's overpopulation. But it's not, right? It's actually, if you look at the actual carbon footprints per individual, there are some people with carbon footprints that are thousands of times bigger than others, right? So it's really about how we consume and how we use energy and how we create emissions that's the key thing, not necessarily just about how many people we have.
Yeah, when do you think the environmental movement really became in vogue? Because I can remember back in the 80s, of course, ozone was a thing, and aerosol cans in its infancy was kind of developed at that point, or people were becoming cognizant of these issues. When do you think it kind of became or it hit stride, I guess?
So that's a really interesting question, and I'm honestly, I would love actually to talk to a historian about this. But I mean, my own personal biases growing up in the UK was there was a lot of shift in viewpoints on things in the 1970s. I mean, if you look at things around climate change, the Club of Rome put out their famous analysis in the early 1970s, if I remember correctly. So that did start to put it on people's agenda. But certainly growing up in the UK, I do remember discussions, not so much about sort of like the impact of CO2 emissions, that wasn't, but certainly lead in gas, that was a big thing in the 70s, right? So I'm trying to think what else was talked about extensively. Energy use was talked about quite a lot because of the oil crisis, right? And so we started to see sort of like more. I mean, solar was a thing in the 70s in the UK. I mean, it's incredible to kind of look back on it, right? Yeah. So people were all thinking about what they could do with solar in the 70s. So for me, and then when you put in like the blue orb image from Apollo, I think that had a big impact, because it literally was showing the whole Earth to everyone and giving you a realization of this. So I would kind of point to the 70s, but who knows? I could be wrong.
Yeah. Okay, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. And, of course, the oceans and what we do to the oceans is that is something that is out of sight, out of mind.
That's a huge issue.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and it's a big problem. And I mean, a lot of people who are who work in the oceans and work closely with marine systems are really concerned about this, because it's an out of sight, out of mind issue, and it's a real struggle to get that into people's heads. Although I would say, I mean, the catastrophe that is microplastics in the ocean is actually getting a lot of awareness, and I think people are starting to realize, look, this is just massively problematic. I mean, the fact that we could extrapolate all of the plastic that's going into the oceans out to 2050 and say, look, there'll be more plastic in the oceans than there are fish by mass, that's pretty insane, right, when you think about it. So we are starting to see an appreciation for that. But again, it's one of those things, many of these big environmental issues, I mean, no single country can solve them. You have to have international agreements on them. And it's a shame, really, when you look at ozone, you brought that up. I mean, the Montreal Protocol way back 40 years ago really did have an impact on the ozone hole, right? It got us out of using all of the really bad chemicals that were impacting all the ozone and into a new set of chemicals that were better. But again, a few years later, now we've got a growing issue with the ozone hole again, because the things that we've replaced them with, there's just so many of them. We've got an issue there too.
Yeah, and microplastics, of course, outside of we're hearing now that they're everywhere almost, basically in a lot of food, and it's becoming a real serious issue. And I think when you look at the amount of the ubiquitous nature of plastic, why wouldn't it be that way, right?
Yeah, no, this is the problem, right? That people we tend to think the smaller something gets, the more likely it is to be broken down. But when you have some of these plastics that literally there's hardly anything in the ecosystem that will break them down, what happens is you make them smaller bits, they're still there. Yeah. Right? And they're still going to be interacting chemically with things and so on. And so now we have microplastics in food, microplastics in plants and things like that. So it is a reality. Yeah. Yeah,
and bisphenol, of course, which leaches into water from bottled water. And I don't want to fearmonger here, but these are all. But in the end, Rob, I mean, we have to live in this world. I mean, you're drinking a can of water right now, of carbonated water, and Lord knows what might potentially be in that, right?
Well, I can't. It'd be interesting to put it through a mass spec and see what extra is in there. But no, I mean, you can't monitor everything, obviously, and we do rely upon regulation. I mean, that's the only way we can get on top of these things.
Yeah. Do you think that I mean, and again, and that falls on government, right? And government agencies.
No, absolutely. I mean, there are some certain levers that you can use within the marketplace, like you can have consumers refuse to buy things because of, and this is actually. It's really interesting that they've talked about putting CO2 emissions, embedded CO2 emissions, in packaging so you can see it. And a lot of vendors are very worried about that because they're so concerned about the potential influence on purchasing that could have, right? But I'm okay with the government regulation side of it as long as governments take it seriously, right? And some don't. Some obviously are very deregulation focused are not going to want to put regulations in place. And I have concerns about that, especially if you have a situation where people know that putting embedded CO2 on packaging is going to create a very variable marketplace.
Mm. And, of course, then you've got jurisdictions and good actors, and then you got bad actors who won't. And then you've got the cost imbalance that goes along with that. And we see this with energy, right? Here in North America, energy costs a lot more for manufacturing than in China. China, this is part of their business model and labor practices as well, and less pay. So and then that introduces cheaper products into the consumer sphere.
Well, I mean, in theory, you handle that kind of situation. I mean, if people are using dirty energy, you can handle it with some kind of costing system, right? So there are penalties that get paid, right? And that ends up making the products more expensive, right?
Right.
But again, those kind of things are very difficult to negotiate in international agreements. Right. I mean, that's the hard part of this. Although, we're literally seeing a certain person to the south of the border throwing all of that trade policy out of the window and just like, oh, we're going to do this week and this the next week, which obviously completely messes up the financial markets. But there we go.
Yeah, and of course, you've got the dollar store, not to besmirch the dollar store, but that thrives on all these things we're talking about, right? Mass production, cheap energy, cheap labor, cheap products.
And I mean, we're starting to see pushback. I mean, fast fashion has seen a lot of pushback quite recently, that literally these are low-quality garments made with some questionable business practices. And so we are starting to see real changes, I think, on that front.
Yeah, for sure. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. All right, if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker and you've got a science-related question or topic that you'd like to have addressed or get his opinion on, give us a call at 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back.
Facts.
Right, the Science Files with Rob Thacker continues. Give us a call, folks. Lots of open lines for you. If you'd like to chat with Rob, now's a good opportunity. I know it's a nice day out there and people are distracted and perhaps they're
Actually, look, this is fine. I'm really okay with people finding the sun more interesting than me, right? That's fine.
Well, considering we haven't seen the sun for about 3 weeks, you're competing with it, right?
It's been so cold in May.
It has, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, look, for those of you out there who are listening and want to chat with Rob Thacker, give us a call because we've got some open lines for you, folks. Give us a call.
Or it's just going to be me and Todd for an hour.
That's right. It's your choice, folks. It's your choice. 902-405-6000. Listen, I saw this story on the Global News website. I sent it to you this morning.
Sure.
I'll read a bit of it, and then I'll get your take on it. Gold hidden deep within the Earth's core is making its way to the surface of our planet, leaking through the mantle and into the crust. Scientists have found a new study out of Germany examining isotopes found in volcanic rock that has oozed from Earth's deepest riches, has found that precious metals are abundant in the core. So is this new information, or we kind of knew this, did we not?
I think we kind of did know this. So what you got to remember is when you make up a planet, you have what's called planetary differentiation. So all of the heavy stuff goes to the core generally, and all of the lighter stuff is on the outer parts of it. So that is not a big surprise. And in fact, I think that they could probably, I'm sure there's calculations out there that have estimated what the proportions of the different elements and different isotopes are, right? And that's something that goes back to a supernova. You average a bunch of supernovae happening in a certain area, that produces all of the material that then collapses down to form the sun. And the planets. And so there will have been predictions in terms of what the overall isotope levels are. And so I'm not entirely surprised by this. The challenge with it is, I mean, this is not really gold that you can easily access, right? And so... And it's not going to be in a particularly sort of like enriched form either. It's not going to be in the lovely veins that we see in gold deposits and so on. So this is going to be mixed up, kind of low, low levels mixed in with other things like ruthenium, platinum, and so on. So there's going to be a lot of other things mixed in there with it. And so what's it like if you go all the way down to the core? Well, it's kind of an academic question, really, because it's not like you can do that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Journey to the center of the earth just ain't happening.
That's right. So when it comes to gold, though, it's more than just aesthetics, and it's there's intrinsic value to it because of the application that it's used for in so many things like like instruments and on it goes.
Oh, yeah,
right?
it's huge in electronics, right? I mean, so gold has some lovely properties. I mean, because it's not particularly reactive, right? It's a great conductor, right? Because you can put it on something, gold plate it, and then the conduction will stay pretty much the same. And so other than getting dirty, of course. But no, it's used extensively because of the various conduction properties as well. So it does have intrinsic value. I think to a certain extent, although it does have all of these applications in electronics, it's still, from my perspective, I still genuinely believe that the main issue with gold is the gold market, right? And now more and more we're seeing regular people investing in gold. Right. I mean, people say, okay, people have been doing that for a long time. But more and more, if you have a robo-advisor telling you what to buy, because gold has been rising and rising and rising, it's telling people to put a certain proportion of gold in there or invest into a certain proportion of gold. And I think that's creating a bigger and bigger demand for gold. I mean, we're seeing that right now. Gold is at an all-time high. Now, admittedly, you can say, well, there are all of these issues with what's going on in the financial market, so people are going there because it's considered a safe investment. Right. But nonetheless, there is more and more demand for gold at this sort of like commodity level than I've seen in a long time. Okay. Joe's giving us a call. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Todd. I was chatting with you earlier, and I was saying to Vanessa that I feel kind of weird to speak twice. But
that's fine. That's fine. No problem.
Not stopping anyone else.
No. That's right. I have a question. Well, not a question for Dr. Rob, but it's something that you brought up about the microplastics, and I don't know what to do about. Like, this is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, apparently, when it's ingested by humans, they stay in the human body. Like,
yeah, I mean, I will say, just so I always try to make everything clear. So there's a number of studies going on about the long-term impact on humans, but at the moment, it's not entirely clear. We do have examples of like other biota where we know that there's significant impacts.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we've got like islands of plastic. And I mean, to say that there's more plastic in the ocean than there is fish.
That's predicted by 2050.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, like I would, that voice with the microplastics, I mean, with Teflon and what we cook with and how that stays with us, it's pretty important. And oh my God, my cat just brought in a mouse. Okay.
That's for you.
As long as it's dead, that's the main thing.
Yeah, no, it's not. He's playing with it. So anyway, but really that's I think a really significant problem with this world is, I'll go and I'll buy, groceries, and everything that I buy is plastic wrapped, and I mean, we can recycle it and I mean, like that's all well and good. But I mean, if you've ever driven past a recycling plant, they brought up one of the counselors brought up the waste and just the polluting of it. I mean, a lot of it gets missed, and I don't know how to make that voice a little bit more louder, but this is a huge problem, and the economy the way it is almost supports it, right? Like, I mean, plastic.
Well, okay.
Almost
not only supports it, but relies on it.
Well, so Joe's brought up a really, really good point here that I just want to underline. So where we're seeing like real issues with like this is aluminum and aluminum tariffs. Right. And so that's a huge issue in terms of, ironically, I've got the can right here. So that's where we're seeing some companies like Coca-Cola turn around and say, well, if the price on aluminum is increased by a tariff too much, then we're going to go back to plastic. And that is a nightmare. It really is.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I mean,
absolutely.
I know that there are still, you go to any store, you'll still see some sort of like pop bottles that are plastic and so on. But by and large, we've done a pretty good job of shifting somewhat away from that. But this kind of like trade war situation, that really bothers me. Right. It really does. Because plastic is so cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, I think PEI was one of the provinces that you can't, I don't know if it's still enacted, but PEI was one of the provinces where you could only buy glass. And I mean, like, glass, you throw it out the window or whatever. I mean, like, it happens. Let's not, but that, somebody steps on it, it's, but plastic won't do that, right? I mean, in that regard, it's a little bit safer. But I mean, plastic is it's a huge problem with this world.
Well, but Joe, but that's a really good sort of like question right there. So is plastic safer in the long run than glass, right? And so,
okay, listen, we're up against the break, Joe. Do you mind if we have that answered after the break?
Right on. Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. 902-405-6000. We'll be back.
Facts.
All right. 902-405-6000 is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. We get Rob Thacker to the top of the hour and get some room for you as well. We were chatting with Joe before the break. Joe just wanted to come back to you and give you an opportunity to ask your question again, and then we'll get Rob to respond.
Right on. Thanks very much, guys, and really appreciate it. And the thing is what I find is we need to be more responsible. Like, we need to be more responsible. Like, I compost everything. Anything that's fat or meat goes in my green bin. Anything else, I compost everything. Just make dirt out of it and put it in the yard, right? But I mean, when it comes to plastics, like, this is like, I don't know how to raise the issue of this, because it affects everybody. It affects everybody.
I mean, the challenge with plastics, literally, I think, is the consumer aspect of it, right? And so when you have something that
there's a system in place that we need to replace.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're slowly going in that direction. Certainly with younger people today. I mean, okay, I'm at a university, so the younger people I see are at the university, but there's a lot of the younger people today, right? And so there is a real and genuine concern for getting more sustainable packaging and so on. We're seeing that. I mean, and I've seen that to a certain extent with the packaging that we have on campus. Like, we've moved away from many things like sandwiches and so on. Those are all packaged in cardboard.
Yeah, single serve stuff.
Right? Yeah. So we are seeing things there, but still, when you go to, like, I don't know, crisp packets and so on, that's all coming in sort of plastic still and so on. So we do need to figure out how we're going to do that. And there are alternatives. It's just a question of making those alternatives as economical as we can.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, we're not getting away from plastic, but we have to use it properly. And it is like, I mean, my recycling, I'd like to be able to separate it, to tell you the truth, between tin and plastics and glass and that kind of stuff. But everything goes in one. And, you know, I mean, it's got to be daunting to actually manage that process. And I'd like to see this city, you know, take a step and really say, listen, like, this is important. This is important for the people. And, you know, thanks for the break, because it allowed me to clean up the dead mouse that I have as a present.
So maybe then I'll wrap this up with one thing about the glass versus plastic situation. I mean, that is a situation where, like, I mean, growing up in the 70s, 80s, I remember broken glass bottles and so on. We were always sort of like, be careful on the beach and so on. So I get that and why people are concerned about it. But at the same time, when you look at the overall impact of plastics, I take a bet that when averaged across all of society around the world and the ecosystem, the impact of plastics is so drastically worse than the concerns about a bit of broken glass here and there.
I'd rather have a cut foot than a bunch of plastic in me.
Yeah, and we're going to have to, I think, to a certain extent, come to deal with that. I mean, I was talking to Todd about why glass is so amazing, because you can literally reform it so easily. Now, there are some recyclable plastics, but generally you tend to go to a lower and lower grade of plastic as you recycle. So it's just not the same and just not as reusable as glass is.
Yeah, and I mean, like I say, it's just got to be responsibility. Like, I mean, like I say, there's a system in place that plastic is just the thing, and I mean, it's polluting us. Like, us as human beings, it's polluting us. It's getting into our system and it doesn't leave. And you know, Rob, just in closing, I don't know what to do about this because I'm only one person, but really appreciate. I'm not a scientist by any means, but so I don't have much intelligence in terms of that stuff. But really appreciate what you do, and Todd as well. You know, you give a voice. So yeah, and it's a wicked day out there. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Go and bury the mouse.
Yeah,
that's right. Take care. All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Do you have a follow-up, before I go to
I was just going to say, like, I mean, even as an individual, your consumer spending habits do make a difference.
For sure. Absolutely. Alexander, hello.
Hi. Good afternoon, Todd. Good afternoon, Dr. Thacker.
Hi.
I had two space questions that are probably right in your wheelhouse, but now with all this talk of plastic, I wanted to use one of those. Microplastics, do they have a lifespan? Would they convert to their base chemical makeup after 100 years, or are they just microplastic forever?
No, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, these things are so stable that, I mean, eventually they will break down. I mean, but that's a physical process. That's physics I'm talking about rather than chemistry breakdown. So there's a very small number of things that are capable of breaking these chains in the ecosystem, and that's the key thing. It's like people are trying to come up with solutions that will break down these long chains, but thus far it's not been great. I mean, there are certain enzymes and so on that they've used, but it's really, they're not going to break down in a hurry. I think for certain plastics there is an estimate of how long it will take. So certain plastics that will break down, whether it's sort of like by sunlight and things like that. But for many of them, no, they're going to be around for a long, long time. Would
Good old Mother Nature be able to come up with something in a while, like bacteria that might adapt and use it?
That is not, as far as I know, that's not entirely inconceivable. And so if you look at what's happened with studies of oil spills, there have been changes in bacteria in terms of how they feed on the hydrocarbons there. Because it's really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities between long-chain hydrocarbons, literally carbon backbones with hydrogen atoms and plastics. There's a lot of similarities there. But certainly some of the enzyme production things is related to using different bacteria as well. I've seen that for sure.
Okay, my quick space question. I've been watching some videos that says space has a sound. Is there a sound in space, a background sound?
I've got a problem with that, right? Because space is a vacuum, and sound won't travel through a vacuum. So when someone says there's a sound in space, I really think that means. So there is. I've got to be careful here because my colleagues in the department are going to give me a ribbing for this. But so that you do have the potential for variations in the cosmological or the gas in galaxies. It's not a complete vacuum is what I'm saying. There is some stuff there, and there is a possibility of sending what we would call a sound wave through that material, but it's so ridiculously longer wavelength than the kind of sounds that we think about that realistically that's not comparison to sound as we know it in our atmosphere. Okay. So you're saying that my YouTube videos are lying to me? I'm saying they're using the word sound in a way that's a little bit unfair. Okay. No, because when I hear these videos, some of these noises are right out of a horror movie. I always wondered if it was true or there was anything to it at all. I mean, I have to. It's ironic because the terminology is we will talk about the sound speed of the gas in the galaxy, but it's really the actual amount of material is so low that compared to what we have in our atmosphere that it's just not sound as we know it. No, that's great. Again, thanks for your time. No problem. Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. That's where to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000. Couple of email questions. This one from Mark says, have you heard the idea of sending tiny probes of Proxima Centauri? I think that's what it is. Yeah. Via lasers, which could send the probes at about 20% of the speed of light. He says, I've read this is around 60,000 meters per second, so pretty darn fast. Yeah, and so the actual physics of the idea isn't crazy, and so I've heard a bit about this as well. The thing that I don't understand with this, and let me just sort of explain the idea. The idea is the smaller the probe that you send, the less power you have to put in it to get it to go somewhere. Like literally less mass means less energy, right? And so this is something that I've seen proposed. They're talking about really sort of postage stamp size craft going to our nearest star system, Proxima Centauri. And the physics makes sense. The thing that I don't understand is if you send things there, how are they ever going to have enough power to send any information back? I don't understand that. I don't know how you'd ever be able to get anything back from them. And so I think while, you could actually send something, you could get something there, I think practically once it's there, it's largely an inanimate lump. Right? Okay. Yeah. Here's an email question from Colin. Says, do any physicists spend time trying to discover some of these hypothetical particles like tachyons, or is it more like the math
works and any real world discovery will be byproduct of some other experiment?
So something like tachyons. So tachyons are literally particles that travel faster than light. There are all sorts of issues with this. I mean, I do believe that there are some theories that have predictions of tachyons, and so people have tried to do a small number of experiments, I think, looking for evidence of weird reactions that possibly might be related to them. But it's not something that people take very seriously, right? So compared to we have what's called the standard model of particle physics. And the standard model of particle physics predicts this whole menagerie of different particles and different reactions and so on. And so right now, people are trying to look for a particular kind of decay that's not been seen, the so-called double beta decay. And so there's a lot of stuff that's done that's really quite well motivated within what we call the standard model. And so tachyons and stuff like that doesn't really get much attention because it's so, for want of a better term, out there.
Yeah. I was trying to recall where I heard that term tachyon, and it seems to me that it was there a Star Trek reference? Tachyon field or something like that?
Tachyon pulse.
Yeah, tachyon pulse, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean, tachyons literally are things that are hypothesized to go faster than the speed of light. And for all the reasons I've said on the show so many times, there's problems with that.
Okay, fair enough. Give us a call. We got Rob Thacker to the top of the hour, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to get in a science-related question, we get some time for you and some room for you. Again, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker, astrophysicist, St. Mary's University. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. If you'd like to chat with Rob, we get some time for you and get some room for you as well, 902-405-6000. Blake's chatting with somebody over there on the phone. I'm not sure if they want to talk to you or not, Rob. But in the meantime, let's talk about this story that you sent along from The Guardian. The headline, Seeing Infrared, Scientists Create Contact Lenses That Grant Supervision. Interesting stuff. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so it's a great sort of title for the story. But so our particular light that we can see is limited by red. People know that. Once you go beyond red, you go into infrared. And so some animals can naturally see some infrared. There are some snakes that actually see far infrared, which is literally a thermal emission. So obviously that's good for seeing prey and so on. But these particular scientists were trying to find a way of helping humans to see further into near infrared. Quite why is let's not ask that question right now. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so they've done research in mice where they particular what they call nanoparticles, which are literally little systems that as the infrared light comes in, that infrared light is then increased in wavelength to a wavelength that we could see or the mice could see. And they did this by literally injecting things into their eyes, right? And if that makes you go, yeah, I'm not surprised. So for humans, what they've done is to take a contact lens and put these little nanoparticles in that will, again, increase the frequency of the radiation so you can see it, all right? And then they put the contact lens on your eye, and so if there is this near infrared coming in, then you see a sort of like blip from that, and you can actually see that at the wavelength that you can see. And that's the key thing when anyone talks about sort of something that will augment you, be able to see something that you can't see. What's got to happen is it's turned into something that you can see. So in this case, they've been able to do that. They do admit that although the contact lenses work, they aren't very good for low levels of near-infrared. You need to have something that's bright in near-infrared for them to work. And they also, which is really interesting, work when you've got your eyes closed, which I thought was really interesting because your eyelid will actually let through a reasonable amount of near-infrared radiation. So that's sort of like one, advantage, drawback, you make a choice on that one, right? And so now I sort of said, let's not talk about how these would be applied. What's the point? So when the journalist said, okay, why did you want to do this? Well, they said, maybe we could send secret messages by infrared light or something like that. So I don't think they've really thought about this in detail. But all of that said, I don't want to sort of like stop people innovating when we haven't actually thought about what the application would be. I'm sure there is some potentials, I don't know, whether it's quality control or something like that, application for these things, possibly.
I could see, though, if where there's lots of potential, though, for something pretty interesting.
So I think the issue is going to be when you have it, so all of these particles are embedded within the actual contact lens. And so I question whether you're going to be able to see the particular sort of source or whether you just get a blip that you can see or something like that. I'd be really interested. They didn't get into that in the article. I'd be more interested to know about that.
Okay, and also this one from the BBC. Scientists propose novel way of treating mosquitoes for malaria, which is, for malaria is not something that we have an issue with in this country, but it's certainly something that is of concern in other countries, other parts of the world.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, one of my concerns is malaria is still this really significant killer, like 600,000 people a year. And anyone who's been to Africa will know that really one of the ways it's handled is to take these anti-malarial drugs, which really do a number on you.
Yeah.
They are not nice things to take. My partner has taken them for the time she's been in Africa, and they're really not good for you, right? So some people get terrible dreams from them, nightmares that cause some real issues. And so what the scientists have done is they've said, well, look, we have the opportunity to use insecticides, even something like DDT, which has really significant environmental damage aspects, is still used in the context of mosquitoes because it's one of the best things we have for killing them, right? But the scientists are saying, let's come up with a way of trying to kill the malaria in the mosquito before it gets into the humans. And so they've done this by looking at a bunch of different drugs. They found one that attacks a certain DNA weak spots within the malaria itself. And so they came down to about a short list of 22 drugs, and then they narrowed it down to a couple that work really well, right? And so the idea, and this is really good, the idea is that you coat the netting, because they'll still land on the netting while you're sleeping, with the drugs, and then the drugs are actually absorbed through the legs of the mosquitoes, and then you kill the malaria within the mosquito by this method. And on top of that, you can still, which surprised me, you can still put some insecticide on. So even if the drugs aren't enough, you can still actually have a possibility of killing the mosquito with the insecticide as well. So they're looking at two sort of like potential ways of addressing the issue here, and the fact that you can combine them is a good thing. The only sort of concern might be whether malaria might develop some kind of drug resistance. I don't know. They'd have to sort of, or there would have to be some kind of study into that and so on. But really interesting. And I think one of those things that we have to remember is malaria still kills a lot of people.
Yeah, 600,000 people per year, according to this BBC study, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a good thing that there are smart people in the world who are doing work like this.
No, I mean, seriously, I mean, it's incredible to me that the nets are one of the most important things. I mean, it sounds like a really simple thing, but mosquito netting is incredibly important. Right? And one of the challenges with it is, I mean, I know a lot about this because my partner has told me so many stuff about being in Africa, but so for some people, it's so hot at night sometimes in Africa that you really don't want to put the net around you, but you have to. Yeah. Right? And so once you put that net around you, then it gets warmer, your carbon dioxide is coming out, and that's what's attracting the mosquitoes as well. So if you can have something, it's a natural mosquito attractant, but then you've got the insecticide and you've got the drugs on the outside, it's going to help.
Yeah, and of course, nets save lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of fundraising is just for simply providing people with nets, right?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, which is very simple, but not novel, but effective.
Some things work. Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Some things really do work.
At one point, it was novel, right?
Well, I mean, a really good netting of the right size was probably not easy to make initially, but once it was done, it was done.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Rob, listen, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks a lot. And thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
Okay, that's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Enjoy the fantastic weather out there. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness as well, as always. On the other side of the glass, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.